What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burtonette. We are officially 3 weeks away from draft night, from round one of the NFL draft in Detroit this year. And so with that in mind, over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be going through kind of a series of a variety of different things, looking at the prospects. Obviously, because this is College Football Talk from a college perspective, I probably won't be taking too deep of a dive into, where prospects fit. I'm sure I'll maybe do like a mock draft or something like that. But in this first video, what I want to talk about is the guys that I think are the best picks for value. What that means to me, it doesn't necessarily mean that these guys are going to be, late selections that are going to be 5th, 6th, 7th rounders that I'm diving deep into. I'm looking at some of the guys who are maybe, mid to late first round, and then especially that 2nd, 3rd, 4th round talents that I think are probably potentially guys who deserve to be selected higher. I'm going to be going over each of the main positions, starting on the defensive side of the ball. But before I do, if you go on to enjoy this video and want to see more like this, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date. But without further ado, let's look at the best prospects by position for value. And I'm going to be starting out with defensive end, with the edge rushers specifically. And in this one, there's a couple of guys who were major contributors for teams that were either in the college football playoff or just outside of it. The first guy here, I wouldn't say he's huge, for value, what I was just describing. Jared Verse out of Florida State is projected to be kind of probably around that middle first round. Some have him kind of higher in the first round. Some have him a little lower in the first round. I think he's very high value for the pick. I think he's the second best edge rusher in this class outside of Alabama's Dallas Turner. Verse last year had 9 sacks, and he actually had 9 sacks the year before as well. And over the final 2 games of this past season against Florida and Louisville, he had 6 tackles for loss over just 2 games, so really played well during the final stretch of the year, and I imagine would have kept that going had Florida State been playing in the playoff. Obviously, we're left out, Jordan Travis's injury and all that. I've covered that before on the channel. The second guy here, though, kind of fulfills a little bit more of this value definition, and that is Bralen Trice out of Washington. I was extremely impressed by him this past year. I know his numbers took a dip. In 2022, he had 9 sacks and 12 tackles for loss. Those were slightly down to 7 sacks and 11.5 tackles for loss. Whether that's down to a drop-off in his production or, the level that he was playing at, or because he was starting to get more attention from the offensive line that he was going up against, I think it's probably a little bit of both, and still the numbers that he had were highly productive, and he was a huge piece of the Huskies' defense, being able to rush the passer and get into the running lanes as well. He is projected to be kind of a middle day 2 selection, probably later 2nd round, maybe 3rd round. He's in different places on the board, but that's kind of the baseline of where he's at. I think he is tremendous value. I think he is right there kind of behind Verse and maybe a couple of other guys in this class. And so I think he is a huge selection for value. In the interior, Leonard Taylor out of Miami, I think, is the best pick for value at that position. His peaked as high as the number 26 on draft boards, but he's kind of averaging out to around, I think maybe it was like pick 100 or either like late 3rd round, early 4th round. Some had a middle 3rd round. I think he has a chance to be selected high. I think he impressed for the Hurricanes. I know their, final tally in terms of wins and everything didn't look very good, but I think he's the type of guy that can make an impact at the next level. Now, one guy who did win a lot of games is the guy at linebacker that I have here, and that is Junior Colson out of Michigan. He didn't have a combine or a pro day. I think that probably impacted where he's at now. He's projecting to be kind of a 3rd round draft pick, but like Taylor, he's projected as high as number 20 overall on some draft boards. And I think he was an instrumental leader in the middle of the Michigan defense. You got, cornerback Will Johnson, safety Mike Sainristil were 2 of the guys who really led the defense as well from the secondary. But in the middle of that defense, along with, I think, Michael Barrett and some other guys, Junior Colson was an incredible leader for the Wolverines and helped get the Wolverines that national championship. And I think he is a very, very high-level, high-value selection. Then moving into the secondary, at cornerback, I have DJ James out of Auburn. 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, for the Tigers this past season. He's projected around a third to fourth round selection. His only real question mark is his size from looking at draft boards and looking at tape and everything. He lacks a little bit of that physicality, but I think if you're going to have a weakness going into the NFL, I think size and strength, it's risky, but I think it is a good weakness to have because, yes, you're going to work on a lot of technique, but going into an NFL weight room is geared to put on some extra muscle and some added weight. If he can bump up, he's around 170 right now. If he can bump up to 180, I think he has a really good chance to be a little bit better in press coverage and continue to improve in the areas that he's excellent at defensively. And so I think, again, third, fourth round selection out of Auburn, DJ James is really high value. Finally, another SEC DB. The SEC tends to produce incredible DBs. I think that's probably part of why I lean toward James there. Safety Javon Bullard out of Georgia. He has one off-the-field issue. He was arrested for driving under the influence, a DUI, when he was in college. But aside from that, it seems like he's cleaned up his act from that as well. Aside from that, he's projected as kind of a late second-round selection, but some of the numbers that he had for the Bulldogs just this past season, 56 tackles, 1 for loss, 2 interceptions, and 5 pass breakups. And he kind of anchored that Bulldogs secondary in the back at safety. And I think he is extremely high value. I think he's one of the top safeties in this class, and I think any team would be smart in trying to select Javon Bullard out of Georgia. So that's it for the defensive side of the ball. Now we move to the offense, and starting, of course, like usual, at quarterback, I think Michael Penix Jr., the gunslinger out of Washington, projected to be probably second round or very late first round. He's been as high, I think, as number 2 on draft boards because of the season that he had for the Huskies. There are some question marks. I think anytime you see a lefty, for whatever reason, that's going to get a lot of teams kind of asking questions. But I know the path of his passes, his arm path, is exceptionally well. I saw a video on social media a while ago where it flipped it and showed it as a righty, and it said that it was kind of one of the better pass angles in college football. He will be able to plug into really any offense. Transferred from Indiana after battling injuries. Of course, those are question marks as well. But I think any team that selects Michael Penix Jr. has a chance to put up high-powered attack on offense. And then a similar guy, I have two at quarterback because it is such an influential position. I have Jordan Travis. Obviously, if he wouldn't have suffered that injury against North Alabama, he would be so much higher on these draft boards. But instead, he's kind of mid to late in the draft, probably more than middle rounds. But I think any team, again, you got to understand the injury concerns. He did have a very serious injury to end this past season. But the Seminoles quarterback was exceptional during his years at Florida State, and I think any team would be fortunate to select him. At running back, again, I also have 2 guys here. Top guy, probably my favorite running back in this class, is Blake Corum out of Michigan. He's a projected second or third rounder. I think he's extremely high value. He's a leader. He knows how to win football games. He's an incredible rusher. He has a great eye. And of course, a lot of people are going to say that some people, detractors are going to say he's a red zone merchant or whatever you want to say, but I think he had some pretty long distance runs as well and showcased that he can do that as well. And then the other running back is Will Shipley out of Clemson. Both of these 2 guys are probably 2 of my favorite running backs from this draft class. He's projected to be kind of more around maybe like that 4th round. Again, running backs are always going to be a little bit lower. That's just how it is. You're not going to use a first rounder on a guy that, on average is going to last, 2 to 3 years. But I think Will Shipley is also a leader. He has that kind of mindset to be a leader and to plug into an NFL team and potentially lead a room of running backs, a couple years down the line once he gets more experience. So those 2 guys are who I have at running back. At wide receiver, I have Keon Coleman. This is obviously a very, very rich wide receiver class. You have Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, Malik Neighbors out of LSU. Those 3 guys kind of lead this class among some of the other guys. But Keon Coleman out of Florida State has been as high as, I think, number 11 on draft boards. He's dropped down a little bit. He's kind of late first round, early second round, but I think he would be exceptional value for teams who maybe are selecting a little bit later in that first round or have another pick, early in the second round, where if he drops down a little bit, yes, you might have missed out on one of those three, generational talents in those first three guys I mentioned, but you're still going to have a chance. Another guy would be a Jalen Polk out of Washington, or Jalen McMillan, also out of Washington. Those are some of the other names as well. Or if you miss out on a guy like Brock Bowers at tight end, and that leads perfectly into tight end. And the guy that I have here is a guy that kind of burst onto the scene, maybe unexpectedly, you could say, and that's Ben Sinnott, I think, out of Kansas State, who had 49 receptions for 676 yards and 6 touchdowns for the Wildcats this past year. He's kind of all over the board, probably because he's had such a quick ascension, but he's kind of anywhere between kind of the second and fourth rounds. I think that ability that he had to be a pass-catching tight end will be huge. His blocking, I'm not quite as sure about, but I know that as a receiving tight end, you could see the numbers and you could see the production that he had. He will be able to plug in for teams, that are looking for that. And I think another guy, Ja'Tavion Sanders out of Texas, is probably one of my, aside from obviously Brock Bowers, the generational, once-in-a-lifetime talent that he is. I think Ja'Tavion Sanders is a really good pick as kind of that second tight end for teams who miss out on Bowers. And then Sinnott would be another guy who's up there as well. Finally, rounding things out in this video with offensive line. In the interior of the offensive line, I think Zach Zinter out of Michigan is, of course, a risk because of the injury he suffered against Ohio State. He's projected, kind of 4th or 5th round now. But I think any team that selects him, even if you're not necessarily going to get him playing on the football field right away this next year, I think you're going to get a guy who is a true leader, who's extraordinarily experienced, and who has a real depth and wisdom of the game and the skill set to back it up as well. So I think Zach Zinter is a smart pick. And then at tackle, this is probably the guy out of all of these prospects that I think is the most of a kind of diamond in the rough, and that is Garrett Greenfield out of South Dakota State. He, again, is a guy that's kind of a little bit all over the board, but definitely more of a late-round selection. He has the physical tools and the ability. I think he's 6'6", 310 or something like that. He has the intangibles. South Dakota State is, I think, back-to-back FCS national champions, so he has winning experience there. They're on par with some of the teams probably in the middle of FBS, really, not just the lower-level teams in FBS. So he has experience playing, very high-level football. Just because he's FCS doesn't mean he should be overlooked. So Garrett Greenfield out of South Dakota State, if you're a team that's looking to kind of shore up your outside, he's played at both tackle positions. I think he is a really good bet to potentially bolster a team's offensive line. But that is it for this video. Again, let me know your thoughts in the comments below on who you think some of the highest value guys are in this draft. Let me know what type of videos you want to see more in these next few weeks before the NFL draft. But that's it for this episode of College Football Talk. I'm your host, Peter Burnett, signing out. Peace.